Hey, well, good afternoon. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to come and have a little chat with us. We're super excited to be able to present about one of our passions, which is nutrition. So we're going to be talking about building a balanced breakfast today. Um, I'm Lexi. This is Tiffany here in the blue, and then Abby. And a little bit about our presentation. Me and Abby are going to do some of the nitty gritty of why breakfast is important and what parts make a healthy, balanced breakfast. And then Tiffany gets to do the fun part, doing the food demo, and gets to give you all food. So you guys can get excited to be with Tiffany. So, what are some barriers you guys have to eating breakfast? Yeah. Time, yes. Other barriers. We're a chatty group, so we're going to be asking a lot of questions today. We like to talk with you guys. Yeah. Oh, eating too early in the day makes her feel ill, if any of you guys relate to that. Yeah. Food prep, yes. The healthy version of yourself sometimes is like, man, why did I not buy that donut? Yes.
Messages about whether or not I should even eat right.
Mm. Okay, conflicting messages and all the fun stuff we see on social media of you should do this, no, you shouldn't. So that's a big one. Any other thoughts? What are some barriers you guys have? Okay, not feeling like you're ready to eat. Okay, so let's switch it a little bit. Why is it important we have breakfast? What are some thoughts we have of why it's important we even make the effort to have breakfast? Yeah. Okay, yeah, energy. I saw a hand. Yeah. Yes, you are speaking to the sports side of me. That is a great answer. Any other thoughts of, yeah. Me too. People are like, oh, I just forgot to eat. I'm like, that's not an issue I have. Okay. Any other thoughts? If not, we're going to take, oh, yeah, it's true. Breakfast is so yummy. Do you have a favorite breakfast item? Everything. Love it. Okay, so some really great responses of some barriers that we have when it comes to breakfast. A big one I have is time, trying to run out the door and eat something. And then some great thoughts on why it's important that we have breakfast. So we took a dive into some of the research of why breakfast is important. So when we talk about setting the dietary tone for the day, I was talking with Tiffany, and sometimes you're like, hey, I'm gonna eat good today, and you get up and you have your donut, and you're like, okay, whatever, I'm just gonna go crazy today. It's already over. Donuts are really good. I love donuts. That's one of my favorite foods. But it sets a nice tone for the day, um, getting something with a balanced meal, helping control hunger cues and blood sugar. So when you go to bed at night, you're going through a long period of fasting where you're not eating. So your blood sugars tend to dip low in the morning. So when your blood sugar's low, you can feel really low energy, and it can be really difficult, like feeling good and ready to go. So that's one of the important things from the research of eating breakfast in the morning and getting something in, is it helps control those blood sugars. And then also, if you guys have ever missed a meal and you're like, okay, like I am so hungry, I'm just gonna like stuff my face with all these things I've been craving. You're like, oh my gosh, I just ate like a 10,000 calorie meal. I should have just eaten a meal. So that's one of the things they found in research, is when people have like small meals throughout the day and aren't going huge amounts of time between meals, it helps you kind of be able to control those hunger cues as you go throughout your day. We heard this, it provides your body with energy. We'll talk more about that today with some of the different components that will be in our balanced breakfast. So we'll talk about that later. And then as all of you are working professionals, you have enhanced cognitive function. Who wants their brain to work well? Not many hands, but what a great thing. It can have positive effects on all your executive functions, being able to improve memory. So breakfast really is important. Another one that was significant was weight control. Like we were just saying, sometimes when you go a long period of time and haven't eaten, and once you're starving and you can't get food right then, you want to just like shove everything in your face and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to eat. So they've seen that as people have more balanced breakfasts and like consistent meals throughout the day, they're able to control their weight better. Okay, so these are some things that we will be talking about today for making a balanced meal. So we'll be looking at specifically some whole grains. You have protein. I don't know what happened to the little N over there. And then the healthy fats, and then we'll be talking about color. So when we talk about components of a breakfast, we're going to use a fancy term called macronutrients, which just basically means all the things you already know. If you've heard of carbs or carbohydrate, proteins, and fat. So the first one we'll talk about with whole grains, that falls into the carbohydrate category. So with carbohydrates, this is kind of a hot topic throughout nutrition, but carbs are really important for your diet because your main fuel source in your body that your body runs off of are these carbs. So as you can see, we put this cute little model down here. This is a sugar that comes from carbs. And so as your body breaks down these sugars, that's the main fuel source that it then goes out to your body. Variety. What is the first thing you think of when you hear carb? Breads, pasta, all these things. That's the first thing I think of. There is actually a lot of variety within carbohydrates. There's the standard things that you think of, bread, pasta, but then also fruits have lots of different carbs in them. So if you're wanting to include different kinds of carbs in your diet, there's a lot of different colors and variety. With breakfast, you a lot of times will see fortified cereals. That's a great source of carb to start out your day. And then here's a question that's kind of interesting. What foods should we pair with carbs and why? Does anyone have an idea? When we say pair, we say like combine with a carb. Any thoughts of what foods we should put with carbs? Yes. Okay, that was so, you guys. Okay, so proteins are really important to put with carbs because like we were talking about a little bit earlier in the morning when your blood sugar is dipping low, carbs, they're just sugar. You see that little molecule. And so when you eat carbs, it will spike up your blood sugar. So it's important when you're having carbs, you're going to pair them with proteins. So that's the next one we'll talk about. So proteins help slow down the rate of absorption. So you think, for example, we use donuts already. I love donuts. I had so many this weekend. We had a baptism and it was so fun. But so for if you grab your donut and you just eat that, you're gonna have a huge spike in your blood sugar where you like right in the high of like, okay, I have so much energy. And then you're gonna crash. If you've ever felt that like, whoa, like I just feel kind of bad after that. That's because that carb by itself is providing that energy and it goes through super quick. But when you pair it with the protein, it allows your body to slow down. So you're still having that steady increase where it's raising your blood glucose to an appropriate level, but you're not going to have that spike. So it's over a longer period of time, you'll feel fuller and you won't have those same effects of that blood glucose spike. Another thing that protein does, this is kind of tapping more into the sports side, which is super fun, but as active individuals, you are constantly breaking down parts of your body that need to be rebuilt. We call this a catabolic state. So as you go and work out, as you're walking around, as you're teaching your classes, doing all these things, your body needs energy to help rebuild what has been broken down. So one of the main builders of that muscle is protein. So it's really important you get that into your diet because it's going to be helping you feel stronger because it's helping rebuild your body. And then another fun part of protein is it supports that active lifestyle, like we were just saying. So, Abby?
Thank you, Lexi. Wow, I'm not used to using a microphone. Usually I'm just yelling at a classroom. This is super nice. Okay, we're going to talk about fat. First of all, I want to ask you guys, who, when you think of fat, thinks of like something that's not good for you? It's okay. Yes, sometimes I think I'm like, fat, why are we adding fat? That's fat. But there are different kinds of fats. We have healthier fats and unhealthy fats, which I added color and pictures into this. I don't know why it's not on there, but that's okay. So we have things called monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats and saturated fats. Has anybody heard of MUFAs or PUFAs? That's kind of a funny word we use. PUFAs are polyunsaturated fats. MUFAs are monounsaturated fats. We like to throw that around sometime. We're like, get your MUFAs and your PUFAs, right? And so, and why do we need fats? Fats are very important for helping us to digest those fat-soluble vitamins. That's vitamin A, K, vitamin E, and vitamin D. Those vitamins are really important to help us fight off inflammation in our bodies. And that's why we want to include them, because if we don't have fats, we can't absorb those fat soluble vitamins. And there's also things called essential fatty acids. Has anybody heard of those? Okay, does anybody know why they're essential? Or why we call them essential? Yes. Yeah, that's part of it. Another part is because our body can't actually make them. That's why they're considered essential, because we have to get them from food. So it's things like omega-3 and omega-6. Those are essential. And yes, they do help with our brain function and our hormone regulation. So when we want to include fats in our body, again, saturated fats, they are really yummy because they're in things like butter and cream and ice cream, all those good things, fatty meats. I mean, the fat is what makes the meat taste good, right? But that's okay. You can have some of those. We want some of those, but the idea is to have those in moderation. What you want to have is these MUFAs and PUFAs, and that comes in things like nuts and oils and seeds, nut butters, things like that. And so in your breakfast, we want to be including some of those things. And it's all about quality of the fat, not of quantity. So when we say quality fat, we think of those MUFAs and PUFAs. So we're going to look at the structure. That's why we have these funny pictures up here. So if you look at the saturated fats, you just got these zigzags. They're called saturated because they're saturated with hydrogens. There's a hydrogen on every single one of these. That's why they're zigzaggy. And since they're all the same shape, when you put them all together, they stack really easy. And saturated fats are solid at room temperature. That's why they're solid, is because they all stack up. And in our bodies, they can also stack up and they can cause some buildup in your arteries. There's something called atherosclerosis. When I learned that word with my twin sister, we would say atherosclerosis. That's how we'd say it every time because it's such a funny word. But that's why we want to avoid tons of saturated fats, because they build up. But these polyunsaturated fats, they've got this funky shape. So when you're trying to stack them all up, it doesn't make a solid fat. So that's why they're important. And why for breakfast? So breakfast, like we talked about, is something, it can give us energy all day, and fats take longer to digest than carbohydrates. So they're going to give you satiety, which is a funky word, but it just means to make you feel full. So that's why we include those. And again, they help with brain function, like our lovely volunteer told us. Okay. Whole grains. So growing up, when I was eating breakfast, I always wanted the sugar cereal. Sugar cereal is my favorite, the Cocoa Puffs, all of that. My favorite, Captain Crunch, right? And I was always like, Mom, I'm kind of hungry, like at like 9 o'clock. I eat breakfast at 7. I'm hungry at 9. And she was always like, well, if you have fiber or whole grains, you're going to feel full longer. And I never understood the science behind that. So when I learned the science behind that, I was so excited, because I was like, this is why my mom told me to have whole grain toast instead of my white toast. But I really liked the white bread, but the whole grain bread was better. So the dietary guidelines for Americans, they recommend that at least half of your grains are whole grains. Can anybody tell me what it means for a grain to be a whole grain? Anybody? Yes, in the back. Yes. Exactly. We've got the germ, the endosperm, and then the bran. The bran is on the outside. So the bran is where all of those nutrients are. We've got fiber, and we've got the B vitamins, and we have a bunch of different minerals like calcium, magnesium, iron. Those are really important for different parts of our body and body functions. So that's why we want the whole grain. And so some whole grains, we have like of course, whole wheat. We have quinoa, there's oats. Oats are a really good version for gluten-free. My sister's gluten-free, and so we get gluten-free oats for her. And that's why we need those whole grains. It's got all those nutrients. Another thing that whole grains help is with control of cholesterol levels. They also help lower your risk of diabetes because they help control those glucose levels that Lexi was talking about before, because it takes longer to digest, as well as they provide fiber, vitamins, and minerals. And yeah, that's what I was going to say. Okay. And this is the science of why they make you feel full longer. They take longer to digest, and that's super simple, but it's so important because when you eat that for breakfast, you're not going to have that spike. You're not going to feel like you need to eat snacks in between, and you're going to feel good for the rest of the day. Okay, Tiffany.
Awesome. Okay, so the last topic that we're going to cover before going into the food demo is the color. And oh, this is the alternate.
You're stuck with me again. I forgot we had other slides. Okay, so when we think about having multiple macronutrients for breakfast, sometimes that can be a little bit overwhelming because you're like, I have to have the fats and the protein and the carbs. How am I supposed to get all three of these things in one meal? There are actually quite a few foods that have multiple macronutrients in them. This is a very small list of foods because there are so many, but I wanted to pull up some that you could possibly be eating for breakfast. So nuts, you can have nut butters. There's peanut butter, almond butter, sunflower seed butter. And then those ones have the healthy fats as well as protein. And then we have eggs. Those have protein and fat again. Sweet potatoes, which is going to be part of our demo today. So remember that. They have those carbohydrates as well as some fiber and important things from vegetables. Greek yogurt has those fats and protein again, as well as avocado that has those healthy fats and oils. Okay. And I think colors come later, so thank you.
Okay, so we just provided some easy ideas of what foods go in which category. So for whole grains, if you're trying to scrape your mind of like, what the heck is a whole grain? Here are some different foods that we were looking into. So we'll have waffles today. So we have the whole wheat that is important to use in it. If you're looking at a bread and you're like, I'm not quite sure if this is whole wheat, if you look on the back, one of the first things on the ingredient label should say like whole grain something. And you're like, I don't know what the something is. If it says whole grain, you have a whole grain food. Same thing with pasta. So that's always helpful for me in the grocery store when you're looking at it. You're like, I mean, it kind of looks like a whole grain. I don't know if it is. If you look at that ingredient label, you can always tell. Some other great whole grains that are yummy for breakfast, oatmeal. If you love oatmeal, you can do it in the traditional way. Overnight oats has become a really big thing that are yummy as well. Easy way to put in whole grains. And then like Abby was saying, where her mom told her to eat some whole grain toast, you can have it in toast. And then we have different cereals. You can get kind of all your baked goods, muffins, and whole grain varieties. Quinoa bowls. I've never had quinoa for breakfast, actually. So if you try it, you should tell me about it. That's an interesting recommendation. And then granola.
Okay, and then this is another list of just the protein-rich foods that Lexi was talking about. So we have the eggs, the low-fat milk or milk alternatives. We have Greek yogurt and cottage cheese, lean breakfast sausages. There's a lot of chicken sausages and other varieties out there, as well as protein powder if you are wanting to include protein in a food that is not naturally rich in protein. And then here's some other healthy fat ideas for you. Another thing I love to remember about fats is that sometimes we label them good and bad, but fats in their natural form have a combination of all the different types of fats. So there's some monounsaturated fats, but you just want fats that have a higher portion of those healthy fat components instead of the trans and the saturated fats. And then here is the color that we were getting to. So color we like to include just because if you think about the foods that are high in colors, oftentimes I think about oranges and other produce items. And these foods are going to have a lot of the micronutrients that we want in our body. And so these also include things like phytochemicals that help fight off cancer and infection. And so these are really important to include in our diets as well. And another thing about color is that we want a variety throughout the day and throughout our week and just in our dietary habits in general, because the more variety of colors that we're getting, the greater chance that we're getting a wider variety of those micronutrients, phytochemicals, and all of those good antioxidants that help our body repair and function properly. Oh, thank you. Okay, and so before we do our demo, we just wanted to take a second and brainstorm some ideas of breakfast foods that we could have that include all of these different components of carbs, protein, fat, and color. And so if you want to take a second to turn to the person nearest to you and think about the foods that you personally like to eat, because if we make a list of ideas and say, here, this is great for you to eat, if you don't enjoy eating it, then that doesn't have so much of a purpose in your life. And so turn to your neighbor and share some of your favorite foods that could combine these nutrients. And then we'll share some ideas. I'll just share about the app and then, oh no, you're totally good. I'm like, oh. And then yeah, if you want to hold it while I just mix things up, but I'll talk about the app first and then we'll do that. And then we'll have questions. No, you're totally good. I was like, I don't think so. I think it's just the question slide at the end. So we can do that. Okay, let's take about 1 more minute to wrap up our ideas and then we'll share them. Okay, I'm really excited to hear some of these ideas. Did anyone's partner or themselves come up with one that they want to share with us? Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And do you blend up the cottage cheese in the batter or do you just mix it? Awesome. That is so smart. Yes, would love a recipe. How about in the middle section? Anyone have some good breakfast ideas? Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect. You got your protein in the yogurt, and then you got your healthy fats with the nuts, and then whole grain with the oats in there. And the nice thing about that is too, it's minimal prep work. Once you make it and you just eat it. How about over here? You got one? Okay. Let's hear it.
At Costco, it was a mix with chai seeds with the oats. Super simple, you just put a half a cup of milk in it, shake it up, put it in the fridge. Next morning you get up and it's got dried strawberries in it.
It's great. Yeah. And overnight oats, as Lexi was saying, they got super popular and they're awesome because you can make all these different varieties and include all the different fruits or different flavors. And that one sounds awesome because it's even more simple. You just add milk and water and then you're good to go. That's great. Well, one of the struggles that I often get with breakfast, like we were talking about at the beginning, is just coming up with ideas. Like you were saying, you get in a rut and you remember you're like, I'm tired of eating the same foods, but you don't want to take that energy and try to make some new ones. But the good thing is there's a great resources out there. And I just wanted to share one with you guys that I love. There's an app called Cook List, and this app allows you to do many things, but one of the great things it lets you do is if you tell it the ingredients that you have in your pantry and fridge, it will create recipes and say, hey, you can make these recipes with the ingredients that you have on hand right now. Which is great because there's been so many times I find a recipe that I love and want to make, and I look at the ingredients and I have maybe a quarter of what is needed. And so this is great. And you can also keep track of your meats. If you have ones, it will say, hey, this is about to expire. You should use it in a recipe. And so it's a great resource. And there's several out there, but that's just one that I love if you don't want to spend that much time and thought into what you're going to eat in the morning. And with that, too, oh yeah. It's Cook List. Yeah, it's an app. I know it's on. Oh, yeah, it's COOKLIST. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Has anyone used that app before? You just found it? You're ready. Yeah. Yeah, and it even has new functions now that if you go to the grocery store, you can scan your items on your receipt and it will add those to your pantry list so it knows that you have that on hand. So it's awesome. And with that, we will kind of show this demo. And this is sweet potato waffles. And I know a lot of you were saying at the beginning that time is a big thing or prep in the morning. And I love these because these are something that you can make once on a Sunday or any day of the week, and then you can freeze them. They freeze super well. And that way you're just reheating it in the morning or grabbing it and letting it thaw as you go to work. And so with this one, the recipe tells you you can use 2 bowls, but I always just like to use one in general because then it's less dishes and we're all a fan of doing less dishes. And so you're going to start with your dry ingredients, and that's going to be your whole wheat flour. If you don't have that, you can also use whole wheat pastry flour. And you're going to combine that with your baking powder, your salt, and your cinnamon. And you're just going to combine that in a bowl. Thank you, Lexi, for So you're going to combine that, and then for your wet ingredients, you're going to take your eggs, like we were talking about before, that have some of those fats and also protein. And then you can use either 4 tablespoons of butter or you can use any other oil that you have on hand. And so you're going to add that and combine that together. And then you're also going to add in your milk, and then you're going to use sweet potatoes, what I like to do is if I'm roasting sweet potatoes, I'll just throw in an extra one. And so that way, if I'm making dinner, then I'll also just have one more that's already cooked so that I can just throw it in the waffles whenever I make them. But if you do not have sweet potatoes, you can also use canned pumpkin, which is everywhere this season. And so you can combine that as well. And then once you mix all of that together, you have a choice. You can make it into waffles or you can make it into pancakes, whatever you desire. If you want to thin out the batter and make it into more of a pancakes. I know sometimes I tend to lean towards waffles because they seem more convenient to me. You can just put it in the waffle maker and let it cook itself. And then once we mix all of that together, I'll add the milk in. And then you'll just take a 1/3 cup at a time into your waffle maker. And then once it's cooked, then you are done. And that's it. Do you guys have any questions about the recipe as you're looking at it on the handout? Good. Yeah, we have some more if you need them. And then, oh yes, where's the hand? Oh. Sorry, I found it. Oh, good. Oh, yes. So that one, yeah, it was 2 tablespoons sugar. I've actually, whenever I make this, I think it's sweet enough that I don't use it. And so but if you want to, you can use any sweetener. You can use 2 tablespoons of honey. But we also today, we wanted to make it fun. And so we added some dark chocolate chips into the sample ones. And so you can always throw in extra ingredients and then you can top it with anything you want. I know, were you talking about waffles earlier? And you were saying you like putting yogurt or berries. Yeah, so that's perfect. And I just love how it's convenient and it leaves less prep for you in the morning. Do you guys have any other questions on the recipe? Yeah. That is a great question. So we did not put it in an analysis, but if you wanted to, we could put it into a comp nutrition and give you the macros if you want those afterwards. Perfect. So, oh yeah. Yeah. Right. So what I like to do is I'll either take, if I really, sometimes I am just such in a rush that I just need to freeze them in a container and they're edible in the morning. But if I really want to make them like as crispy as possible, I will wrap them either in parchment paper and then aluminum foil around the outside individually. And then I'll just stack them up in the freezer and that way they're individual grab and go. That's probably the best way that I found. And then you can either put them in the toaster to reheat them or microwave them and eat them. Yeah. Now we will just go on to some questions in general about breakfast, nutrition. Any questions that you have for us? Yeah.
This is the best time of day to eat breakfast. Is it right when you wake up or several hours later?
Want to take that? Yeah, I can take that one. So I know we had that addressed at the beginning, that question about when to eat. And there's a lot of things, a lot of people are like, people tell me to stop eating at this time and start eating at this time. And what we would like to say is just if you keep any consistent schedule, so if you are not hungry right when you wake up in the morning, that's okay. But finding a time in your schedule where your body can know that it's going to get fuel and energy. So just at a consistent time in the morning, that way your body, it's kind of like sleep with circadian rhythms and your body just gets used to things. And so if it can get used to a specific time, then that helps it a lot.
Also, the research study we put up there, one of the recommendations that they showed within that study was within the first 2 hours of you being awake. So that isn't to say like it has to be within those 2 hours, but according to that study that we were looking at that provided the different recommendations and benefits, it was within that 2 hour period. Any other questions you guys have? Yeah. Okay. Do you want to take that?
So there's a lot of,
Do you want to repeat the questions?
yeah, the question was, what's the research behind intermittent fasting or skipping breakfast? There were a lot of studies on for weight loss. Intermittent fasting can be very beneficial, but also you have to have a carbohydrate or a calorie deficit at the same time, because a lot of people were doing intermittent fasting and then eating a ton of food in the evening, and that was just totally upsetting the point of intermittent fasting. So if you are looking for intermittent fasting, there is some research online of like the best foods to eat after you're fasting. It can be very beneficial if you are trying to like lose weight or control your weight. Intermittent fasting, there's research that it can be very beneficial, but you just have to watch what you're eating after. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
And going back to one of the benefits with the control, it kind of depends on the person too, because we were talking about it can set the dietary tone, but also help control hunger cues. So like Abby was just saying, sometimes at the end of your fasting period, you'll go crazy and just eat all the calories and more that you could ever dream of. And so intermittent fasting in that instance is like, okay, maybe like you should have just eaten breakfast, you know? So there's some other things that kind of go into that and how you respond.
Last thing, just doing it a couple of days in the week. A lot of the research, it was a 5 to 3, or no, there's not 8 days in the week, 3 to 4 or 5 to 2 type of thing where they were intermittent fasting 2 of the 5 days or 3 of, wow, 5 days. Yeah, 2 of the 5 days of the week. That's what I'm trying to get for. So it's not something you're doing every day. It's just a couple of days of the week. Okay, any other questions?
Okay, well, thank you for being with us today. If you guys want to come up, we have some of these waffles that Tiffany made for you. And if you have any questions, we will stick around afterwards if you want to talk with us one-on-one. But thank you for being here.